Welcome to Blonding Combo, foliage and traditional highlighting technique combined to create this beautiful look. As you can see, our client started out with some old brassy highlights and a lot of grow out natural. Here we are starting our first section. We have a left and a right section and their little triangles, and we'll be moving up the back as a brick lay pattern. We're going to do 3 back to back, and on denser hair, you can do up to 5. Now, when we get to the center section, there's a full triangle. We're going to be doing another 3 foils with a nice tease at the base. And this is going to be on the back of the head. It's going to give a really beautiful blend when she wears a ponytail. Now, the back is all very dark. There's no color on it, so I don't have to worry about anything previously lightened back there. So I'll be doing a full application and a pretty heavy application to make sure we don't have any brassiness that occurs. Now, whenever I start an application like this, I always drop my developer a little bit, and then as I move to the very front of the head, I up my developer. I always say play on the side of caution and start with 10 volume and move your way up to 20 or 30 as needed, depending on the hair. Now, here's my balayage board. I'm kind of in a section where it's a little bit more difficult to hold on to the foil because the hair is so long, especially with that tease. And I want a really good heavy saturation here. I'm going to start layering my foils where I need to be just to make sure the application is smooth. But sometimes I fold them as well. There is no rhyme or reason, whatever works best for you. As you see here, I'm doing these back to back, and I'm taking slices and doing a really nice heavy tease. This is really important to create some boldness and brightness on the ends, but the base to feel a lot more depth. The blend will be really beautiful and gentle. It won't have any harsh lines, and that tease is really important. I always say take less hair rather than more hair, because if you take too much per section and try to tease it, it can get really messy, and the saturation of the lightener doesn't always lift as evenly. So less hair is always better. This brick lay pattern I'm using is 3 left, 3 right, and then in the triangle from the center, we'll do 3 about midway up from those previous foils on the sides as my starting point. Have all your clips available because you might need extra support with those teasy hairs because they can get in the way. Now, this balayage board you see here, I made this myself from Tap Plastics. You'll save yourself a ton of money if you want, because you can decide the size that you like. Now, if you want a longer board or a shorter board, these costed about $8 to $10 per board, and this one's clear, but you can have them made in any color because they literally have every shade of the rainbow available. And it's a great tip if you want to specialize your own size. Sometimes I like these extra long boards for extra long hair, and it just gives my work extra help with the security of those foils. Now, as you see, I've done left, right, center, and then we're going back into the sides. Creating this brick lay pattern is really showing up, and it's giving a ton of dimension, which is really important because leaving hair out is as crucial as what you paint because they're working together. Now we are giving a lived in balayage look using foils. So this foliage technique here is giving us the lift that we need, but encapsulating it in a foil to get even lifting results. My general rule for doing these is levels 1 through 6 hair, let's put it in a foil. We want to make sure we can get even lift without being too brassy. Now, people who hand paint darker levels are most likely not trying to get blonde. It's very difficult to get an even lift throughout the head, hand painting without any foils because the foils are encapsulating the heat and helping you get the lift that you need in order to create the looks you desire. The darker the hair, the more of the underlining pigment shows up. And so, if you want to lighten through those, you need to use the foils to get the lift you need and keep the product working. In the back, I'm pretty much slicing every section and doing a nice tease to it. I'm not going to be weaving the back because she doesn't have any previously colored hair there, and I need maximum brightness on the ends. As we move up the hair, we will start to have more previously colored hair in our sections. So we'll have to be mindful not to over process those areas. And if it takes you extra time to pick out those pieces that are super light already, do it because it will save your work in the end for having less damage and your client will be so much happier. A service like this really takes me 4 hours. This is not something I can go faster or cheat my client because I want to make sure I give the best possible application so the results are really beautiful. A service like this does take 4 hours, and you need to charge accordingly for your time and products. I love using high-end products. They cost a lot of money, and I do have these conversations with my clients in my consultation prior to the service to make sure they can afford this service and have real expectations. It is expensive for both the client and the stylist, and we also need to get paid for it. Now that we're hitting the center, we've basically done this brick lay pattern and we're getting to the crown of the head. And as you see, now I am teasing the sections and not just slicing anymore. I really want to soften up the look on the crown area and not be too bright in the back. When we move to the front of the head, we'll be putting a lot more foils in and we'll go in all the way to the scalp. But while we're in the back area, to have that kind of lived in look, we want to make sure the base is not super bright. So we're still going to be teasing. And by using the weaving technique with the tease, it won't be quite so bright at the base and have a nice soft transition to the boldness of the ends. This is kind of the tough area for some people because some clients have really large swirls that just open up the hair in the back and everything is very noticeable. So by keeping it a little bit darker and not going all the way to the base, you won't have any brightness right where the swirl is happening and it'll be very soft and organic in the back. Now, again, when we get to the front of the hair, we're going for a lot of boldness, and that's completely different than how the back is going to look. I want the back to be darker, slightly more gentle. And even when I'm doing other clients' hair and I'm brightening, I sometimes take bigger spaces in between in the very back than I would in the very front because I want it to be a little bit darker because dimension is the name here. We want to create a lot of dimension and a lot of brightness, but we don't want the entire head to be solid. We have to sometimes remember what we leave out is just as important as what we put in. Now you see I'm teasing, I'm pulling the hair straight up to the top of the head and then pulling it down. And that there's a bunch of tease happening there, which is great because we don't want this particular area to be too bright like we just talked about. Now, I always recommend to charge by time, but of course, everybody is in control of how they price their menu. You just want to make sure you don't get cheated. This is not a service you can double or triple book with. This is a one-on-one from beginning to end service. It's so tedious, and we have to pay attention to every step of the way. We are just now getting to the very top, last few sections here, and we did leave a little bit more base in between up on the top, and we are done with our brick lay pattern. Again, we teased and we weaved, and we are just about to finish up this section before we move to the sides. Now, this is about the zone where I might up my developer if I need to, because the back, again, we used a lower developer, so we didn't get so much lift that it'll over process before we even get to the front and the sides. So by again dropping the developer down so it's a little slower, and then we will up our developer as we get to the front and sides to move a little faster. So in the end, it's pretty much done around the same time. Now, in my very fine clients like this, I find this to be some of the hardest work to do because being a level 5, 6, it's hard to get that lift to a 9. So I really want to make sure the saturation is really good. And I'm also being mindful of the previously lightened sections because those are already where we want them to be. We don't want to overdo it and saturate in those areas to cause damage. This is why this service can take so long and be so tedious. Now, the maintenance for a client like this probably comes in for this service about every 6 months, maybe even 8 months. In between, I always recommend doing a toner or just a few foils around the hairline in the front for an in-between maintenance, but they don't need to do this entire service every single time if they're coming in sooner than that. The idea is that this can grow out for the next year and still be beautiful because it's a lived-in feeling, and it'll grow out very organically. When I'm doing a service like this, I'm thinking about the previous color, the natural level, and I'm also thinking about the end result and what I'll be toning the hair with. As I'm checking as I go to see how the lift is happening, how much brassiness there is, I'm thinking about my formulation for when I have to tone and gloss at the end to give the nice shiny results that we see. As we finish up the back, we'll be moving to the front now, and I will be coming from the front of the head back. Now we're on the right side, and I'm going to be using baby lights all the way to the scalp here. This is where I want a lot of brightness to be. I'm going to be very mindful of her previously lightened hair to not cause any extra damage, and I'll have to take it as slow as I need to make sure that everything is delicately done. Now, the reason why I'm going to be doing these foils much closer together is because I want her to feel pretty blonde in the front, but really lived in the back so that there's enough brightness where I want it. But because I'm doing baby lights, it won't be solid blonde. You'll have a very soft transition. And I'm basically doing what we would consider a traditional foil technique here, where I'm applying from the base all the way out. But because I'm weaving it very gently, it'll still be very soft and have a nice amount of natural still left in between. I like to make sure I get the hair really close around that hairline. I don't want to depend on using a toner to tap out any lines or bleed marks because that just takes more time that I might not have Here we are still doing baby lights. You can see how much I've left out. I'm still not doing any teasing here. This is just strictly weaving the hair and applying from the base to the ends. And this is how we will go for pretty much the rest of the application here. Now we are sectioning the other side and foiling from the base to the ends. These are baby lights, and I'm being very delicate not to overly saturate the mid to the ends. I don't want to overprocess, and I want to make sure those very fine pre-lightened hairs are left out without product. I will be doing these fairly close together throughout the hairline, but once we move past about an inch or so in, we will give more dimension and leaving more natural. But right around the hairline, we want to be a little closer together so it's really soft and bright when she pulls her hair back and she feels really blonde like on the front hairline. Making sure this application is really clean, taking my time when I need to. As you see, we're moving up the head here, and now this next section has a little bit more gap between it than the front few foils did. I'm still using my baby light technique because I don't want to slice and be too bright and bold here. I want to keep it gentle. And because we're doing a combination of lived in the back and traditional brightness in the front, it's going to have an overall natural effect to it, as if she's been in the sun at the beach and she's not brown hair anymore. As you can see here, there's a ton of pre-lightened hair. And so these moments take a long time to make sure the saturation is correct and those pre-lightened hairs are pushed to the side so there's not a lot of damage. This is why this application can take a long time. I don't like to get lazy towards the end, even though you're feeling a little fatigued. It's good to create the consistency throughout the head and not to give up and get sloppy. Again, I'm still using my baby light technique here, moving it all the way to the base. Here we are at the very front of the head on her front hairline. I'm taking this first section and doing a baby weave here, right straight on the face. This is how I approach a lot of my partial highlights. I start from the front and I want to make sure I get her hairline really well done because it's a pretty straight hairline. It doesn't have any V's or weird shapes, odd shapes. It's pretty flat. And I'm being really careful not to lay any product over any pre-lightened areas. This last part of the head is going to take a long time to be very meticulous. I'm doing the front back to back, but I'm weaving out in between and no teasing happening here. Just your traditional base to end style application. Being mindful of the previously lightened hair as usual, especially in this area. Now, because I've done the whole head, I did up my volume to 30 volume in this very last section here. So I'm going to be very careful not to overlap the pre-lightened hair because 30 volume is going to lift quite strong compared to a 10 volume, for instance. Making sure my application is super clean. As you see, I love good, clean foiling. It's just how I roll. And I'm always striving to do a better application process. I did 2 back-to-back sections, and then this third section, I had a little bit more space in between my foils, just an extra baby slice worth in between, and I've weaved it out. But as I move kind of mid to the back from this section on, I will slowly take a little bit more space in between my foils. I don't want it to be super, super solid up here. I still want to create dimension. So as I feel that we are creating what we need in terms of depth and I'm weaving out hair, you'll see this is where the brightness is really going to pop compared to the back where we were taking a lot less hair from the base because of the tease. For the remainder of my section, now that we've cleared the very front hairline, we will be weaving out, and the last couple foils we will actually tease to kind of mimic the very back, but we will be putting the product from all the way to the top to the end just to soften it up as we go. Now, when it comes to the timing of this entire procedure, the reason why we really want to be mindful of the application process and the developer that we use is so that we don't have to midway through rinse out the back before we're still done applying our foils from the front of the head. I'm all about efficiency, and if we started with 30 volume, the back would be turning white by now and would be over processed, and that is not what we want to be worrying about as we go. Really changing the developer is the most crucial part of a full application like this, and understanding what the development time does to the hair and the efficiency of your service and timing. Our final step in this process is rinsing and toning. Having an idea of where you want to take your client is where the toning process is really crucial. Are you trying to go cooler or warmer? Now, in our client today, we really wanted to cool her down because she naturally does get brassy. So we did take her base down, and you'll see in the final results here. I used Redken Shades EQ. That's my go-to toners. I used 9V, 9P, and a little 10T to top it off. I love the results. It's stunning. It's gorgeous. It's so shiny. And she is so happy with how light she was able to be, but still keeping some dimension. As you can tell, the dimension is really important for those light pieces to pop. I hope you enjoyed this video and you learned a bunch. Thank you for joining me today.